The 7 Words on the Cross by St. Robert Bellarmine. Book 2, Chapter 2. The first fruit to be drawn from the consideration of the 4th word spoken by Christ upon the cross. We have briefly explained what has reference to the history of the 4th word. We must now gather some fruits from the tree of the cross. The first thought that presents itself is that Christ wished to drain the chalice of his passion even to the dregs. He remained on the cross for 3 hours, from the 6th to the 9th hour. He remained for 3 full and entire hours, for even more than 3 hours, since he was fastened to the cross before the 6th hour, and he did not die till the 9th hour, as is proved thus. The eclipse of the sun began at the 6th hour, as the 3 evangelists, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, show. St. Mark expressly says, "And when the 6th hour was come, there was darkness over the whole earth until the 9th hour." Now, our Lord uttered his 3 first words on the cross before the darkness began, and consequently before the 6th hour. St. Mark explains this circumstance more clearly by saying, "And it was the 3rd hour, and they crucified him," and by adding shortly afterwards, "And when the 6th hour was come, there was darkness." When he says that our Lord was crucified at the 3rd hour, 9 a.m., he means that he was nailed to the cross before the completion of that hour, and therefore before the commencement of the 6th hour, noon. We must here notice that St. Mark speaks of the 3 principal hours, each of which contained blocks of 3 ordinary hours, just as the householder summoned workmen to his vineyard at the 1st, the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th, and the 11th hours, and as the Church calls the canonical hours prime, the 1st hour, terce, the 3rd hour, sext, the 6th hour, nones, the 9th hour, and vespers, which corresponds to the 11th hour. Therefore, St. Mark says that our Lord was crucified at the 3rd hour, because the 6th hour had not yet come. Our Lord wished, then, to drink the full and overflowing chalice of his passion, to teach us to love the bitter chalice of penance and labor, and not to love the cup of consolations and worldly pleasures. According to the law of the flesh and the world, we ought to choose small mortifications, but great indulgences, little labor, but much joy, to take a short time for our prayers, but a long time for idle conversations. Truly, we know not what we ask. For the Apostle warns the Corinthians, "And every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labor." And again, "He is not crowned unless he strive lawfully." Eternal happiness ought to be the reward of eternal labor. But because we could never enjoy eternal happiness if our labor here was to be eternal, so our good Lord is satisfied if, during the life which passes as a shadow, we strive to serve him by the exercise of good works. Besides those who spend this short life in idling, or what is still worse, in sinning and provoking their God to anger, are not so much children as infants, who have no heart, no understanding, no judgment. For if Christ ought to suffer, and so to enter his glory, how can we enter into a glory which is not our own, by losing our time in the pursuit of pleasures and the gratification of the flesh? If the meaning of the gospel were obscure and could only be understood after great labor, there might perhaps be some excuse. But its meaning has been rendered so clear by the example of the life of him who first preached it, that the blind cannot fail to perceive it, And not only has the teaching of Christ been exemplified by his own life, but there have been as many commentaries on his doctrine apparent to all, as there are apostles and martyrs and confessors and virgins and saints whose praises and triumphs we celebrate every day. And all these proclaim aloud that not through many pleasures, but through many tribulations, it behooves us to enter into the kingdom of heaven. End of chapter 2.